What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome to episode 47, I think, of the Greyt podcast. Today, as I mentioned last week, we will be doing top 10 offensive tackles going into the 2025 NFL draft. Um, Offensive line isn't the most glamorous position group out there. They're the most underappreciated, that's for sure. But honestly, they're probably the most important. Them and other than quarterback, obviously. You have to look at offensive line and defensive line as being the most important aspects of a football team. Um, I think the recent Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles showed that to a T. The team that had the far superior offensive and defensive line, being the Philadelphia Eagles, won that game in a landslide. And we say here in the SEC a lot that you win championships in the trenches, and that seems to be the case year in and year out. And so, this position, offensive tackle, is the most important position on the offensive line. And they have to deal with some menaces as far as edge rushers are concerned. You're talking about T.J. Watt, you're talking about Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, yada yada yada, right? The Bosa brothers. And a lot of teams need offensive tackles, but we're gonna get right into it. As always, I don't have any honorable mentions for offensive tackles. We're just gonna get right on into it. We're gonna start from 10 and go to 1. I would say the top of the list is pretty vanilla. It's pretty much what you would probably expect. But as the list goes on, or AKA as we're gonna kind of start here, because obviously we start at the bottom, it's probably some guys you would probably expect, but maybe the positioning, I have them on the list differently, but we'll see. But I would say the top 4 that I have is pretty much everyone's top 4, but we'll get into it. Start with number 10, Anthony Belton out of NC State, a guy who had a very good Senior Bowl week. And, again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I am some offensive line guru, because obviously I've never been even close to being big enough to play such a position. And it's not like I sit there analyzing, oh my gosh, did you see his arm length? Did you see the way 90 degrees into the pads pushed him to the side? I'm not that type of guy. I watch and I have an opinion. And I think that's honestly not a bad. I don't think that's a terrible way to do it. I mean, I watch the game. If you play good, great, bump up. If you play bad, sorry. But Anthony Belton is at number 10. He's a guy who I've seen a lot of varying opinions. I've heard. Okay, I'm not saying this. I'm saying I've heard it, that he has a little bit of personality issues, off the field issues, right? But he had a very good week at the Senior Bowl, so I figured he could slot really well here at the number 10 spot. I've seen people who have him higher than that. I would imagine he'll be a second or third round pick. That's kind of where I see Anthony going, because especially with offensive tackle being such a premium position. At 9, Cameron Williams out of Texas, a raw talent. Obviously, there's another Texas tackle on this list that's way higher. But, a guy who's kind of raw, you're going to have to, kind of develop him along. I don't see him being an instant starter at the tackle position for any team. Again, I think I see Cameron Williams more in the second round for some reason. I could see early third, because I do think there's guys I have ahead of him that I think are not going to end up being drafted ahead of him. That's why I think Cameron Williams will be a second round draft pick. I could see it being early second round. I mean, there was talk early on in the process that he could be a potential end of the first round pick, and he still could be that. I could see him being drafted by the Chiefs at the last pick, the Chiefs had the second to last pick of the first round, or the Eagles. The Eagles could, he could be the Lane Johnson replacement. Lane's getting up there in age. That's, potentially what could happen. But I think Cameron Williams, my bad, is a solid player from what I've seen. Obviously, Georgia played Texas twice. And I think Cameron Williams could be fine to the next level. He'll just need to be developed. At 8, Ozzy I don't know how you say his last name. It's either Trapillo or Trapillo, something like that. Ozzy. I'm just going to call him Ozzy. He's a tackle out of Boston College. He's a guy who I've heard more and more about. He had a good Senior Bowl as well, and he has risen up people's draft boards. I think he's someone, though, that's going to not get drafted before Cameron Williams. I think Ozzy ends up being a third-round pick as well. But again, I think he's a good player. I think I don't think any of the guys I've mentioned yet would be instant starters at tackle. I think they're more development pieces, depth pieces, but I think Ozzy can be a good player at the next level. At 7, this one might be surprising. Josh Connerly Jr., a guy who a lot of people have him going at the end of the first round. I've seen him going to the Ravens a ton. I've seen him go to the Chiefs a ton. But and look, obviously I don't know if everyone has, but a majority of us who saw footage from the Senior Bowl saw the clip that went viral of Mike Green, an edge rusher out of Marshall, absolutely annihilating Josh Connerly Jr. on a rep. It was literally hike the ball, and Josh Connerly was instantly on his behind. I mean, it was embarrassing. Obviously, that's not a good look, but does that necessarily mean that you're not going to be at the next level? No. Look, not every rep's going to be perfect. That one just happened to be, honestly, as far from perfect as a rep can be, but it is what it is. I've never been super high on Josh Connerly Jr. I simply think there are tackles better than him. I don't think he should be a first round pick, but I think he will either be into the first round, early second round. I could totally see the Ravens picking a guy like him, or the Eagles, or the Chiefs, one of those teams towards the end of the first round. I could totally see that being the pick for them. At what number am I at? 10, 9 is at 6. At 6, I love West Virginia offensive linemen, which makes sense because I'm a Steelers fan. Obviously, we drafted Zach Frazier last year, center out of West Virginia. He turned out to be a stud. And so at 6, right? Yeah, at 6 here, I have a West Virginia tackle in Wyatt Milam, a guy who I would love for the Steelers to pick. I don't think tackle is of the utmost need for us, though. I think Wyatt will be a second-round selection. I think he deserves to be potentially a first-round selection. I think those West Virginia offensive linemen, they are just nasty individuals. Nasty individuals, I'm telling you. Nasty. And I think he could be a really good offensive tackle at the next level for somebody. I've had him being drafted in some of my mocks, being drafted to Commanders. I think that could be a really nice pick for the Commanders. But yeah, Wyatt Milam in at 6. At 5, a guy who kind of shot up boards and now has kind of just stagnated as kind of a early second round selection. I still think he has potential to be a first round draft pick, and that's Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota. I mean, he's a massive individual. I don't remember who Minnesota was playing, but I remember watching a Minnesota game. I want to say it might have been on, because usually I don't watch Minnesota games, obviously. It's not top of my priority. But I think it might have been like a Friday night or something. Did they face North Carolina at some point? Or was that, I'm literally in front of a laptop. Why don't I just look it up? Don't know why I'm sitting here. Let's see. Schedule 2024. Did they play North Carolina? Let's see. They did. It was okay. It was literally the first game of the season. So I watched them play North Carolina. I think I watched a little bit of them play Nevada. Did I watch them play anybody? I'm sure I did watch them play somebody else. I just don't remember. But I think it was North Carolina game that I watched, where Ariante Ursary, he was just mauling people. I mean, he's such a big dude, and I think he could be really good at the next level, at the NFL level. And I think whatever team gets him, I love the idea of him going to the Chiefs personally. I've had him mocked to the Chiefs a ton. I think that'd be a great pickup for them. Um, but yeah, Ariante Arsery comes in at 5. Now we're getting into the top 4, and this is pretty much consensus for most people. They might have 3 and 4 switched. Some people, I don't. But at 4, Armand Mimbu out of Missouri. He's a guy who has obviously shot up draft boards. Had a good Senior Bowl. He did I say he played for Missouri? I think I did. Um, he's someone who a lot of people have going. I've seen some people have him mid first round. These top 4, I think, are guaranteed first round. By the way, Armand Mimbu, I've had him drafted to the Ravens quite a bit. Who else have I had him drafted to? I'm trying to remember the draft order. But I've had him drafted late 20s. Usually, he's usually the second to last play tackle I have drafted in the first round, around that kind of Ravens area, which I think makes sense. I think they could use a good tackle like him. I could see him getting drafted higher than the guy I have at 3, who I'll just go ahead and say is Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. I have Josh Simmons mocked pretty much all the time to the Seahawks. I don't remember which pick they have exactly. It's in the teens. It's, I think, late teens. But I think Josh Simmons to the Seahawks is a perfect fit. Could I see the Seahawks picking Armand Mimbu instead? Sure, I can see that. I think Josh Simmons is the better player. He had a great he played well in the playoffs for Ohio State, and he played pretty good all season for Ohio State. I think he's guaranteed first round selection, and I would love for the Seahawks to pick him. They need help on that offensive line. So if I'm them, I go Josh Simmons. At 2, I have Kelvin Banks. I had him at 1 for a while. Has some injury concerns. But I think he's a good player. I would love for him to be drafted. He's going to be early first round. I don't think top 10. I think there's only one guy who's going to be top 10, and we'll get to him next. I'm sure we all know who that is. I've been drafting him to the Dolphins quite a bit. I've been drafting him to the Bears some. Obviously, that would mean top 10, but I think the Dolphins could be more likely, and I don't hate that selection for the Dolphins. They need a safety. They need offensive tackle. I think Kelvin Banks would be a great selection for the Dolphins. He can protect Tua, and you have your ideally, theoretically, you have your offensive tackle for the future, as long as he's not a bust. And then at 1, I have Will Campbell out of LSU. You know, I saw him play in person. I went to an LSU Army game in 2023. He's a great player. And there's a number of LSU offensive linemen in this draft. I mean, you're talking Miles Frazier, Garrett Dillinger, Emory Jones Jr., and obviously Will Campbell being the best of the bunch. And who knows, we might talk about Miles Frazier or Garrett Dillinger next week when we talk about interior offensive linemen, but I will not spoil. Will Campbell, I think he's almost a lock for either the Jets or the Bears. The Bears are obviously desperate for offensive line. If I'm the Bears, my first 2 draft picks, I don't care who's available. My first 2 draft picks are offensive linemen, period. 1 at tackle, 1 interior. Ideally, tackle first with Will Campbell, and then interior later. Whoever it is who's the top of your board, pick them, because you have to protect your young asset at QB, being Caleb Williams. You have to do that. You have to protect them, because what you don't want is him running for his life for multiple years to start out his career, because he'll never be able to develop that way. Okay, and when he does, he's gonna develop bad tendencies. He's never gonna trust his offensive line, and that's going to screw over your franchise in the future. And then eventually Caleb will leave. Just like what's happened, or you're going to think he's a bust and he's going to leave, which was what happens with every Bears quarterback nowadays. Like Justin Fields, for example, I don't think Justin Fields will ever end up being a star. But Justin Fields is better than what he looked like at the Bears. He proved that with the Steelers. He was very competent. The Bears made Justin Fields look so incompetent. With the Steelers, he was competent. He won the Steelers games. And I think if Russell Wilson was not the quarterback for the Steelers, if Justin Fields had been the quarterback for the Steelers the entire season, they'd probably still make the playoffs. Okay? Because the Steelers' offensive line isn't top 10, but it's certainly not bottom 10. Like, it's average. And he's a mobile guy. But the Bears probably have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And you can never hope for your young quarterback to develop that way. You just can't. So I think Will Campbell is almost a lock to be a Bear, in my opinion. But that's the top 10 offensive tackles for the 2025 NFL Draft. Next week, we will be doing interior offensive linemen. I know these episodes have started to be shorter. You know, it's because of the off season. I guess I technically could do 2 top 10s in one video, and maybe I'll consider that once we kind of get to the defense after the interior offensive lineman next week. But, you know, I'm fine making shorter videos during the off season because obviously there's been some news this week about potentially going to, 14 or 16 teams for the college football playoff. But that's really been the only news that's really happening with college football right now. I'm not going to talk about every single transfer portal addition or loss. I'm not going to talk about every single coaching hire, firing, promotion. That's not going to happen. I'll give my thoughts, though, briefly about the 16-team playoff. I'm not going to go full in depth on it because at the end of the day, it's not the reality yet. Do I think it will be the reality? Yes. I think there's no doubt in my mind that it will be the reality, especially since it's what the Big Ten and the SEC wants, and what they want, they get. Does a 16-team regular season ruin the regular season? Yes. Because when you just take this past season as a prime example. This past season was a good season of college football, in my opinion. And while it made the regular season less important than when we had 4, it still felt important because teams like Alabama, for example, just missed the cut because they lost to Oklahoma. But when you look at, and South Carolina and Ole Miss, obviously. But when you look at if we had a 16 team playoff, these teams like Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, who else? Texas, Michigan most years, Penn State, none of them, or LSU most years, they're never going to be worried. Or Clemson, they're never going to be worried about missing the playoff. Because in order to miss the playoffs, you'll have to lose, 4 games? When's the next time we see Kirby Smart at Georgia go 8-4? Honestly. I don't see it anytime in the near future. And at 8-4, depending on your wins, you might still make a 16-team playoff at number 16. So that is in part my issue. Now, will the playoff be kind of fun? Yeah, sure. And as a Georgia fan, do I kind of like that no matter what, I'll know I get into the playoff every year at the start of the season? Sure, in a way, but it makes every game feel less than to me. Now, do I still want to win every game? Do I still care about winning every game? Of course I do. But at some point, something's got to give. Look, I thought personally, this is what I think. I think going from 4 to 12 was a mistake. I thought so when it happened, and I think so now. I think they should have went from 4 to 8. I think 8 would have been a good number, personally. That's just how I feel about it. You had 4 on one side, 4 on the other side, and I wouldn't have given any buys. Why does anyone need to buy? All right, I'm fine. I'm fine with if you win your conference, you get it. I wouldn't have had the winner, the best group of 5 team, be involved. I would have had, okay, if you win your conference, you're either 1, 2, 3, or 4, but you don't get a bye. Plain and simple. So take this past year for example. So Oregon would have been the 1, Georgia 2. Who was number 3? Penn State. No. Oh my gosh, have I lost my mind? Arizona State. Arizona State would have been 3, Clemson 4. And then Oregon would have faced whoever the 8 team was. So who was that? Who was the 8 team? I don't even know if I remember. Let's see if I can look it up. CFP. Will it show me the bracket and how it looked? Aha. Let's see. Who was the 8th seed? Ohio State. So it would have been Oregon, Ohio State. It still would have been Georgia, Notre Dame. It still would have been the same matchups. Well, actually, no, not the same matchups because Arizona State would have been 3 instead of 4. So it would have been Arizona State versus Penn State, Clemson, Texas. It still would have been Clemson, Texas, though. But that would have happened right away. So it would have been Clemson, Texas. It would have been Arizona State, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State. That's what it would have been. Which I just think is better, personally. And I don't know. I just think once you start doing this, you just start creating a bunch of things that are out of your control. And because, like, what do we do with conference championship games at this point? Because it almost feels like it's not worth it to play in your conference championship game and win it and go through all of that. Like, because now that's an extra game you have to play on top of them expanding the playoffs, so you have even more games to play anyways. I mean, I don't know. Especially if you lose the conference championship game, and it's like, what's the point? Like, why did we play that? I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't want them to go to 16. At this point, just stay at 12. Just stay at 12. Why do we need to go more? Why? I don't want this to be March Madness, but in football form. That's not what I want. Okay? Because at that point, why even play a regular season? Just start the season with 60 teams in the playoff. I mean, I don't know. But that's how I feel about it. I hope everyone who's listening has a great, Wednesday? Great Wednesday. I'll be back next week for interior offensive linemen. That's guards and centers. And after that, I think I'll do a one round mock. But I'll give more info on that once next week comes around. So again, thank you for listening and have a great day.